Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Center. My name is Jeff Allen, and this evening we'll be discussing Bodhicitta from Panchen Sanandrapa's General Meaning of Perfection. Always very excited to talk about this text. I remember when Rinpoche taught it many, many years ago, and I found it just to be so inclusive. And then whenever he taught Bodhicitta, he would always use parts of this text. Just because it was so easy to get through all of the points of Bodhicitta by utilizing it. And you could really, get to the other side of the presentation, understanding it in a complete way. So that's why I've chosen to use this text to describe Bodhicitta, to describe the awakening mind, Mahayana mind generation. And I hope that you'll find it as satisfying when we get to the end of it, as I did the first time that I went through it with Rinpoche, because I really felt like I got a very solid education in Bodhicitta and how one would get it by the time I finished that text. And it included that section, and it included so much information that I really didn't know of before, or that, maybe I didn't know how it went into the greater picture before I went through it. So that's the reason that I've chosen to this text to go over Bodhicitta. And so let's get started. Let's set our motivation right now. Let's get into a posture, which is a posture that's called the 7-point Virucona posture. We'll get into an intentional posture that allows us to say, okay, now we're going to get serious about listening to a class on Bodhicitta. And I'm going to adjust my body because I'm going to take it so seriously, and I'm going to get into a position that the Buddha stated was the very conducive position for meditation. So it's for that reason that we're doing it. So let's get into an intentional posture, the 7-point Virucona posture. Let's get our legs crossed in whatever comfortable position we can, ideally lotus. But that seems very far away for a practitioner like myself, but lotus is ideal. Right hand on top of the left with the thumbs touching, with the back straight like a stack of coins and the shoulders in a comfortable position, with the head slightly forward, with the eyes slightly open, pointed at the nose, and then with the tongue on the back of the roof of the mouth, kind of behind the teeth, mouth in a comfortable position. And then we'll focus on the breath for a moment. The reason that we focus on the breath is to try to get our mind to a more neutral place. When we come in to class, we've had a lot of experiences that were going on at work, with our families, with our neighbors, with various sentient beings, people in the grocery store. Maybe somebody cut us off, and that's wrangling around and spinning around in our head while we were driving. So it's important for us to really get into a place where we can hear this stuff well, where we don't have any of the problems of the faulty pots, as it talks about in the Lam Rim. We have to make sure that we're really ready to listen, that we're not going to forget what we hear, and that we aren't coming into this kind of contaminated with prejudices that aren't allowing us to properly hear this Dharma teaching. So let's get into this more realistic, neutral place from which we can grow all of those wonderful, wonderful things. So let's start now by focusing on the breath a little bit. And we'll do that for a short period of time while we're in that 7-point Virucona posture. And then we'll get started with motivation and read the prayers. Now we begin to think of our own suffering, the various types of suffering that we've learned about, the 3 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, the 8 types of suffering. Knowing that you don't want to endure those types of suffering, think about wanting to get out of those types of suffering and what it might take. recognizing that it'll be necessary to find out what causes it in order to get rid of it. Recognizing that the Buddha said that we would be able to never suffer again. We could be fearless. And think about what it might take in order to achieve that cessation of suffering. The Buddha stated that there was a very specific superior path that we needed to rely upon. Start to think about other sentient beings who are in the same predicament as ourselves. They also want to have happiness and be free from suffering. We think about our loved ones having to endure the different types of suffering that we have to endure. We think how nice it would be if they could be free from that suffering, just like I'd like to be free from my suffering. And luckily, I know how to do it. I know how to be free from suffering because the Buddha taught it. And unfortunately, everyone hasn't heard that truth. So how nice it would be if I could be part of them getting that truth and understanding how to be free from suffering. Start to think about those neutral to us, those beings that we maybe don't know, those neighbors that we see that we maybe not in our neighborhood that we don't really know. They're neutral to us. All of the other sentient beings we can think about in the hell realms, in the hungry ghost realm, the animal realms, all of these beings almost seem neutral to us because we don't know them in an intimate way, the way that we think about when we think about our loved ones. But we know that since beginningless time, we've been born again and again. We've been professional dyers. And we've had every relationship we could imagine with all of these different sentient beings. Because they've been so kind to us in some of our lives, it would make no sense to leave them out. It would make no sense to not help them. So then we move over to our enemies, people that we don't really like, and we recognize that they've been as kind to us as anybody has been kind to us in this life. And how could we forget them? How could we not want them to be free from suffering? And then we can start to think about individual beings having suffering. Imagine that if you yourself died and then became a sheep. Now you're a sheep and you have all of these desires and you think you're a sheep, just like you think you're you right now. And just imagine all the sufferings you would have to endure. Brought here, maybe eventually slaughtered. Imagine that you're that being that's about to be slaughtered. Imagine that. And then recognize that that being is just as scared as you would be. Imagine if you were being led to be slaughtered, what that would feel like. Imagine if you were a worm, what would that feel like? Imagine if you were a hungry ghost, as it's described, what would that feel like? Imagine that you're living in a hell realm, a cold or a hot hell realm. What would that feel like? And when we recognize that all sentient beings who have been our mothers and kin and best friends have to endure those very things and will feel them the way that we feel them, the way that we feel suffering, they will have to feel even greater forms. And how nice it would be if we could free them. We recognize even the deities in the highest realms have to die. They have to be thrust into another set of aggregates that won't be anywhere near as fancy as the ones that they've had, and that will cause them immense suffering. So the 6 realms of cyclic existence are plagued with suffering, and our mother sentient beings are in a prison because of their ignorance. We have the key to open that prison door. It's the Buddha's doctrine, but unfortunately we haven't progressed far enough to be of real value to all of those suffering beings. We haven't even really begun to want to get out of our own suffering in a complete way. So how do we mature? How do we become capable? We do so by attending a class on Bodhicitta. We do so by reciting the Heart Sutra and trying to meditate as best we can at whatever our level is on what the meaning of those words are. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch. Knowing that this doctrine is speaking of dependent origination and the lack of true establishment of all phenomenon at an explicit level. And then implicitly, that Heart Sutra is speaking of all of the 5 paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. Teta Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha, that allows a being to first generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment in terms of the 5 Mahayana paths, and then traverse all of the different stages in order to become a Buddha. When we look at Buddha Shakyamuni got Bodhicitta and then accumulated merit for 3 countless eons. 1 countless eon, Buddha Shakyamuni hadn't even seen emptiness yet, according to this explanation. And then Buddha Shakyamuni sees emptiness and then spends another countless eon getting up to the 7th Bodhisattva ground. And then spends another countless eon on the 8th, 9th, and 10th Bodhisattva grounds. So we recognize that even the Buddha had to mature over a long period of time. And the process and the understanding of that maturation is embedded within these texts. So we should think about them as we recite them. As we make a mandala offering, imagine that we're offering a perfect universe to the lineage of teachers, starting with the instructor all the way back to Buddha Shakyamuni. When you're going for refuge, imagine that you're going for refuge with all sentient beings around you, that you're leading them in this chant as they go for refuge. Just imagine that. And all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are in the space in front of you as your witness. Make sure that these prayers and these practices accomplish something. They change your mind in some way. They make you a better practitioner. They make you have a better understanding. You accumulate more merit. So it's for this reason that we're here this evening, listening to Bodhicitta and doing the prayers, the preliminary prayers and the concluding prayers and so forth. So with that motivation that we look at ourselves as an ill person, as the instructor is like a doctor, the Dharma like medicine, the practice is like taking the medicine, and we look at how glorious all of the Buddhas are, and we pray that this doctrine doesn't leave this world. And it's with that motivation that we then recite the Heart Sutra. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice practice of profound prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times, by means of prajnaparamita, fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata Om Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasangate, Bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, the whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Aga Zamara Dajanara Zamara Yabeti Ata Ongati Gati Baragati Barasangati Bodhisoha Baba Ganja Sanjiga Idimidoji Lavadaji Bevadaji Sewadaji Jagi Bajimetum Bishitanji Shitin Koye Soha Gerin Don Jaji Jushewada Mitun Vejan Dandewada Tumba Jonjin Bonzon Zonjoji Dashi De Jandenda De Lejo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Gandhi Radayami. Sanye Jananda Jie Jananda Shanju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Chishe Nipe Sananji Trala Venje Sanje Drubasho Sanye Jananda Jie Jananda Shanju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Chishe Nipe Sananji Shala benje zanje drupa jo zanje jadan zanje janan la shanju badu danye jazuji dagi chije ji bezonanje shala benje zanje drupa jo. May this teaching be understood by all beings in all of their languages. Okay, so wonderful. Here we are today again. We haven't died yet, so that's a bonus. We're all here tonight and we're able to practice. So the fact that we're still breathing in and out means that we can practice. And as we learned in Sakya Pandita's text last Sunday, that it's really, there is no time until we're enlightened that we stop studying. And if we still have ignorance from our last life, then, we're going to project it into our next life. And the only way that we can get rid of ignorance is by understanding and by study. But when we look at ignorance itself, and we look at the wisdom realizing emptiness, if we were to apply this wisdom realizing emptiness for 1,000,000 years without bodhicitta, we would not become a Buddha. So we could understand that all phenomena are empty. We could achieve maybe even the state of a hearer or solitary realizer nirvana. But no matter how long we meditate only on wisdom, it will not produce Buddhahood. It's necessary to have that motivating factor for all sentient beings behind the practice in order to remove the self-cherishing attitude, the self-centered attitude. We can get rid of the grasping itself through wisdom, but the self-centered attitude, the self-cherishing attitude, requires different practices. It requires a different understanding. Method is and wisdom are separate things. And when we look at what they produce, method produces the form bodies and wisdom produces the truth bodies. So we see that these two things have very, very different kind of functions, but they're both necessary in order to produce a whole Buddha. So no matter how long we meditate upon wisdom, we can have the sharpest wisdom, the clearest wisdom, the most stable wisdom. But if that wisdom isn't conjoined with love and compassion and the desire to become a Buddha for others' sake, then it will only produce limited results. It won't produce limitless results. It won't produce the omniscience of a Buddha. It'll allow you to understand phenomena, but it will not allow you to understand how to help all sentient beings. So it's a topic that, is one of the very easy as Venerable Chodron. Venerable Chodron said, have fun teaching Bodhicitta. It's a fun topic to teach and a hard topic to realize. So it's really easy to flow off of our lips. The 7-point cause and effect and equalizing and changing self with others and the equanimity. These things just flow off our lips very, very easily. But when it comes to actually realizing them, putting them into practice, we find that we can with those who are nice to us and who we find, that we are attracted to in terms of because they've been kind to us and we like them. So they're like magnetized. So we find it very easy to want to help them and want to, in some way take away their suffering. But when it comes down to people who are neutrals, and then especially people who are considered our enemies, this is what separates, a true practitioner from words. And it's very interesting, the Kadampa masters, they had a saying that said, everybody has a root deity form to meditate on and a mantra to recite. It says, that's because no one has a Dharma teaching to contemplate. So meaning these days, everybody wants to do these higher practices. Everybody wants to meditate on winds and drops and channels and meditate on themselves as a deity and think about this very, very high practice. But without bodhicitta, it could become a cause for hell. It says in the text, if we're not doing these practices for all sentient beings, then it doesn't work. The tantras don't work. The door into the Mahayana, is bodhicitta. So without the Mahayana, we can't become Buddhas. We have to learn how to get into that door. Imagine if we had no idea how to open a door to get into a room. No idea. We'd never seen a door in our lives. Someone has to show us, okay, you got to walk up to it. Don't stand too close and hit yourself in the face with it. You know, you turn the knob and then you step back a little bit and then the door opens and then you can go through it. Make sure you shut it behind you. Like there's all these points you have to learn to even open a regular door. It's the same way. In order to enter the Mahayana, you have to know what the steps are necessary in order to enter that place of the Mahayana. In order to become a bodhisattva, you have to do that. So what are the benefits of getting bodhicitta? So in the Lam Rim, it talks about these 10 benefits. Before we get into the main text, let's talk about why are we doing this? What's the point of getting bodhicitta? Is it something that will, help me be nicer in general? Or will my life be easier just because I'm nicer to people? Or is this something that's really, really necessary to have, happen in order for me to become enlightened? Let's look at these 10 qualities in the Lam Rim that they talk about. So let's just go through them real quick. So generating the mind of enlightenment, generating bodhicitta, is the only entrance into the Mahayana. So there's not another way you can become a Mahayanist than becoming a bodhisattva. And when do you become a bodhisattva? It's when you get bodhicitta. And I think that's number 2. Yes. Number 2, as soon as you get bodhicitta, you're called a bodhisattva. So as soon as you get this, aspirational bodhicitta that we talked about, that has all of these requirements, these physical bases and mental bases, and all of these causes and conditions and powers and so forth, and general causes and particular causes. Once we produce all of these things, and then we generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment, we're A, on the path of accumulation at the smallest stage. We're B, we're called a bodhisattva, a son of or daughter of the conqueror. So when you hear son or daughter of the Buddha, this means bodhisattva. This means someone who has bodhicitta. So someone who's on the path of the Mahayana path of accumulation. We will surpass the listeners and solitary realizer by virtue of our spiritual lineage. So the lineage of the hearers and the solitary realizers, the lesser vehicle lineage, Theravadan lineage, whatever the latest one is the individual liberator, the lineage of individual liberation. That's another one I'm hearing. So you surpass even those, beings who are fully realized in terms of potential. Those fully realized beings in the Hinayana path, in terms of potential, as soon as you get bodhicitta, you surpass them, because you've got the only thing that will make you a Buddha, and they don't have that. Even if they're sitting in nirvana, they don't have bodhicitta. They can't become a Buddha until they are woken up according to scripture, woken up out of their bliss of nirvana and told, listen, you haven't completed everything. You haven't fulfilled your own needs, let alone the needs of all sentient beings. So now you need to circle back and get bodhicitta and traverse the entire Mahayana path. So sometimes you hear these sharp faculty beings who've seen emptiness already and then traverse the Mahayana path. Here's an example. Beings who are in nirvana, who have to traverse the Mahayana path. So it's wonderful, right? We started here. We started with material that allows us to, not have to have this learning curve where we have to have a Buddha in a million eons from now, when we hit, actually are liberated in nirvana in a lesser vehicle, come tell us about the Mahayana. We already had a Buddha come tell us about the Mahayana. We had our teacher, who I consider a Buddha, Kensur Geshe Wandak, tell us about the Mahayana. And he told us about the Mahayana because he heard it through a lineage from Shakyamuni Buddha. He heard it from a lineage that was someone asked the question last week, and I won't go over it completely, about like, how do we know? You play telephone at a party and you find out the message changes, by the time you get to the sixth person. Truth doesn't change. Use your brain. Cut it, rub it, check it, see if it's accurate. That's what the masters did, and that's how the lineage stayed pure. It was checked against what the Buddha said, checked against what the Indian Pandit said, checked against logic, checked against reasoning, checked against truth. Over and over and over and over and over again. And then done again just to make sure. And not understanding emptiness at because the Buddha said there's emptiness. No, this is something that we analyze based on what the Buddha said and come to a place where we infer it to be true because of our work, because we're listening to what the Buddha said, and we start working, we start cutting and rubbing it. We start checking it for accuracy, checking for what we know and don't know. Hold on one second. Hey, Lori. Give me 1 second. I don't know if the screen is covered. I don't think that it is. I assume it's not, but my screen's covered by an action required. So number 3. So the screen's not covered. Okay. So I didn't know if you were reading an action required by Oracle right now. So we were, if you thought you all needed to get right on that or not, but apparently you can't see it. So that's good. Okay, so now we're surpassing the lesser vehicle lineage. The minute that we're on the path of accumulation, we're surpassing their potential. And even though they're way, way ahead in terms of the Hinayana 5 paths, we surpass them as soon as we start the Mahayana. Because of the fact we don't surpass them in terms of their realization, because that bodhisattva may not even know emptiness yet. But in terms of that potential, in terms of what can be, what maturation can take place, they're way ahead of the game. They don't have to circle back and then try to get equanimity and try to understand, all sentient beings are mother, remember their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love, compassion, extraordinary attitude, and then get bodhicitta. They have to circle back and do all of that. And this bodhisattva has already done it. This bodhisattva has the key, has entered the Mahayana, has the thing that when combined with wisdom makes you a Buddha. Without bodhicitta, just the wisdom makes you not a Buddha. Can't become a Buddha with just wisdom. Not possible. Will become the supreme field to which offering should be made. As soon as we become a bodhisattva, we're what causes a Buddha. And the Buddhas are what causes the hearers and solitary realizers, according to the texts, right? According to the Madhyamika Avatara, Chandrakirti's text, that's how that works. So we become this amazing supreme field that offering should be made to the minute that we're a bodhisattva. Think about it. A bodhisattva is someone who wants to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, who wants to do it for everyone else but themselves. Of course they're worthy of veneration. Of course they become a field of veneration. We will easily accumulate extensive merit. So it says in Shanti Deva's text that, even when we're sleeping, and maybe even if we're distracted a little, if we have bodhicitta, we're continuously creating merit. We're continuously gathering merit if we have this bodhicitta. Even if we're a little distracted, even if we're sleeping. Rinpoche used to say, when you're going to the bathroom, when you're walking, when you're talking, when you're eating, when you're not eating, when you're driving, if you're a bodhisattva, you're accumulating merit at all times. So how amazing. I sure can't say I can do that right now. What if you could just always accumulate merit, and no matter what you were doing? And we know that it's necessary to have merit in order to become a Buddha. The Buddha accumulated merit for 3 countless eons. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we could always be accumulating merit? So how wonderful. We will quickly purify ourselves of bad karma and mental obscurations. It's said that when you get bodhicitta, it's like a fire extinguisher to the fire of your afflictions. You know, it's literally like the biggest fire extinguisher you've ever seen. It really wipes out such a large amount. Of course, it doesn't wipe it all out, you know, because then you would be a Buddha, right? That minute. But it wipes so much out, and it allows you to stop making as much more, right? Because you are no longer thinking of things for yourself alone. You're thinking about becoming a Buddha. So everything you're doing is for that. And everything you're doing is for that. And for who? Everyone that our little minds can't even count. Right? We will achieve whatever goals we seek. So what we just heard. What if you're a lesser vehicle practitioner and your goal is to become a Buddha? Sorry, it's not going to happen. If your goal, I mean, eventually you will become a Buddha. All paths lead to Buddhahood. But based on relying on that pathway itself, you will not become a Buddha. But if you get bodhicitta, you can have limitless results. You can have a limitless mind. So, wow, right? So next, we become invulnerable to harms and obstacles. So of course, you know, a bodhisattva, you know, is, you know, maybe going to have things come into their lives, right? That aren't necessarily pleasant, but the bodhisattva finds joy in everything that they're doing. And because they're a bodhisattva, all the Dharma protectors are around them all the time, stopping problems, stopping people from hurting them. Because now they're, as it said here, they're a supreme field to which offerings are to be made. So all the Dharma protectors intervene and try to help the bodhisattva in their job. Because they're like, wow, this is somebody really, really important. We've got to protect them. This is something that's so rare. We will quickly complete all the levels and paths. So how do we practice Tantrayana? With bodhicitta and emptiness as its root, this union of method and wisdom, fueling our practice of Tantrayana, action, performance, yogic, and highest yoga tantra. It's all fueled by method and wisdom. Without method, without bodhicitta, as we said before, you can practice Tantra and end up in hell in the shape of a deity, because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Tantrayana is only done for others. Only done for others' sake, only done to free others from suffering, to become a Buddha as quickly as possible. That's the only reason you would practice Tantrayana. It wouldn't be because it's interesting. You would do it because through the force of this compassion that you have, you can't bear the thought of it taking too long to become a Buddha, and you know that Tantra is quicker. So you're practicing it in order to become a Buddha as quickly as possible for everyone else. So we can quickly complete all the paths and levels because you need bodhicitta to do it. But also, if you want to practice Tantrayana, the door, first you get bodhicitta and you're a Mahayanist, and then you enter the door of an initiation. Right? You become a bodhisattva, you take a bodhisattva vow, which is required to take an initiation. So now you're an engaged bodhisattva. This is a real initiation. Like we do like a facsimile of it, so we leave imprints. But a real initiation is taken by a bodhisattva. You have to have bodhicitta to receive a real initiation, according to the Vajrapani Tantra. You can find it right in the Lamrim Chemo. I'm not going to quote it now. I don't have the ability to quote it exactly, but It says that, those who are bodhisattvas, have the mind generation, are suitable to enter the mandala, not others. So it allows us, it gives us permission, really, to enter the mandala, because you can't take a bodhisattva vow and get it unless you have bodhicitta. We just learned this. We learned that the mental base for a bodhisattva vow is the path of accumulation, is bodhicitta. And then in Pabunka's text, it says, then being like really familiar with aspirational bodhicitta. So you have an intense form of aspirational bodhicitta that then makes you take the bodhisattva vow and allows you to enter a mandala. We do all these tantric practices and everything because we're trying to leave imprints for when we're bodhisattvas so we can do tantric practice. Let us not forget that. It's so important not to forget that, because we need to be working hard at getting bodhicitta and understanding emptiness. If we're spending all our time on self-generation and all these other things without the foundation of understanding that the deity arises from Ivam, from emptiness, and you're having that deity arise for everyone else, without that understanding, it's just playing games. It's a video game. How many more levels of understanding can I get to today? How many more arms can my little video game of my mind can I put on my body? I heard a great practitioner, Alexander Berzin, say, don't let your Kala Chakra, your highest yoga tantra practice, make you not a Buddhist. And he said that he, and he's one of the greatest Kala Chakra scholars around. And he said he got lost in it. Had to rein it back. It's very easy to get lost in all these details and all these high teachings, but not have any idea why you're doing them or how they could work. Without emptiness, they can't work. Without emptiness, it's not even possible to become a deity. You only can become a deity because of emptiness. Our mind can only change into a Buddha's mind because of emptiness, because it's this nature. This nature can be matured. The nature of our mind is that it can be matured. It's because it's impermanent and that it's empty. So it can be matured. So, wow, right? We will become a field that produces every form of well-being and happiness for sentient beings. So now we're a bodhisattva, we're like a field that every form of happiness for sentient beings could grow out of. Imagine if we could be like that. Imagine if we could be a field. Like if we could imagine ourselves a field that everyone's happiness grew from. That's what a bodhisattva is. It's not this like short-sighted kind of compassion that wants to become a Buddha when things are going well. It's this day and night thinking of becoming a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. And why? Because I know that the only entrance to the Mahayana is that I become a bodhisattva when I have that. I surpass even the hearers and solitary realizers in terms of potential by getting it. I'll become a supreme field to which offerings should be made. The minute that one becomes a bodhisattva, even if they're an animal, the gods would bow down to them, it says. If someone's a rabbit, a god would make a prostration to a rabbit who got bodhicitta. We will easily accumulate extensive merit. So bodhicitta is like fuel on merit, on all of our activities, to turn all of our activities into virtue. Imagine if we had that mind that turned everything into virtue and merit. Imagine if we had a mind that just did that. We will quickly purify ourselves of bad karma and mental obscurations, right? We said it's like a fire extinguisher, a really big one when we're trying to put out the fire of these gross, kind of disgusting ways of thinking and behaving. It just kind of gets rid of it. Gets rid of these gross things that will make us have to suffer in very, very difficult ways in the future. And then it causes us to engage in the things that will only make us happy. And when we have to have difficulties, we're happy about it and full of joy because we know that we are making progress. We will achieve whatever goals we seek. We can become a Buddha. We can't become a Buddha without it. I mean, you can't get to bigger goal than perfection. I mean, if someone knows of a higher thing than perfection, let me know. But as far as I know, perfection is the highest you can get to. And it says we'll easily achieve whatever goals we seek. So if we have the goal of perfection, bodhicitta is the only thing that can make it happen when it's combined with emptiness. Now, bodhicitta alone, if meditated on for 1,000,000 years, will not make you a Buddha either. You have to have wisdom. But we'll talk about that another time. But we're talking about bodhicitta right now. But understand that you have to have the wisdom realized. You can't just be this person who wants to save everybody, but not know how or not know what's wrong, right? You have to understand the tools that it would take, the light that you'd have to shine on them in order for them to understand. You know, it'd have to be a light that's very clear, that they'd be able to understand from, and it'd have to be stable. Because, you know, if you have a flickering light, you can't really read a book as well. You know, you need a light that's very bright and very stable in order to see. And likewise, in order to free sentient beings, you need to know what that is. You need to know what that light is. So we will become invulnerable to harms and obstacles. So we have the Dharma protectors all around us at all times as a bodhisattva. And we find joy in everything that we do. We will quickly complete all the paths and levels. So we have the opportunity to practice Tantra. When we look at how rare Tantrayana is, 1,000 Buddhas come. Buddha Shakyamuni is the 4th. Buddha Shakyamuni teaches Tantra. Now we have another Buddha coming, I think 13th, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, I apologize. And then the last Buddha. And there's eons between these Buddhas. And there's only these, you know, the one we have and 2 more, and 1,000 Buddhas that'll come. We're at the 4th that will teach Tantrayana, and we have it. But Tantrayana doesn't work without bodhicitta. So you must be seeing how important it is, right? Tantrayana doesn't work without bodhicitta, can't become a Buddha even in the perfection vehicle without bodhicitta. We'll complete the levels and paths and become a field that produces every form of well-being and happiness for sentient beings. So I really love that part, that you become this field that everyone's happiness grows from, because you know, as you become more and more realized how to help them. As the bodhisattvas traverse the paths, they start out, you know, not being quite as capable, much more capable than, you know, beings who aren't bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation, but they become more and more capable and actually are able to start to emanate bodies before they're a Buddha to help sentient beings. So don't take the bodhisattva path lightly as something, you know, that just gets thrown around and talked about bodhicitta and, you know, he's a bodhisattva, she's a bodhisattva, you know, and throwing it around in a very light way. Understand that this is a highly, highly realized being that is very, very far along on the path. Even though we talk about these eons that are necessary, imagine what it took to get there. Really, really imagine that. Bodhicitta, so the awakening mind, Mahayana mind generation, 5 categories in Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning and perfection: base, cause, nature, division, and benefits. So we went over the base. We decided that there were 2 kinds of bodhicitta we were going to deal with in this section: aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. We went over the base of aspiring bodhicitta, and we found that as any among the 6 realms of cyclic existence, someone can have the first generation of aspiring bodhicitta. And then we looked at the physical base for engaged bodhicitta. We learned that it was really necessary to be in the higher realms to be able to understand and take these vows. And that there were beings in the desire realm and some of the higher form realms that were able to take the bodhisattva vow and have it arise for the first time in their mental continuum. And then we got to mental base, and we learned that in order to have aspirational bodhicitta arise, we needed to have 4 factors. We had to have faith focused on the Buddha. We had to have compassion focused on sentient beings. We had to have perseverance that was willing to endure hardship. And then we had to have general faith and you know all the other aspects of the pathways, which would allow for our mental base to be fertile enough for bodhicitta to grow from, in order for our mind to turn into the mind we have now into a bodhi mind, because chitta means mind in Sanskrit. Bodhi is Buddha. Really, it's Buddha mind, but we have to look at what it means. And it's the mind that wants to become a Buddha for others' sake. So this is, the Buddha is doing everything for others' sake, right? So this is the Buddha mind. And so then we have these mental bases were necessary to get the aspiring bodhicitta. And then we learned that in order to get engaged bodhicitta, you needed to have all of these, and then really generate the aspiring bodhicitta, and then work it, make it strong, and then take a bodhisattva vow. And Kamalashila says that that's what differentiates aspiring and engaged bodhicitta. And Kamalashila's stages of meditation says that engaged bodhicitta is the aspiring bodhicitta with the presence of the vow. And you have to have aspiring bodhicitta first to get engaged bodhicitta. So going back, if you don't have an aspiring bodhicitta, you don't really get a bodhisattva vow. And we can debate it. It's up for debate, but this is the thesis I'm making. And many, many other great teachers that I've read about and lamas have told me, they are also making too. So let's see. I don't want to spend too much time on stuff that we've already gone over. But yes, it's necessary to have this basis of the aspiring mind. It's necessary to be a bodhisattva on the path of accumulation in order to take a bodhisattva vow and get it. And then once you take a bodhisattva vow and get it, you are on the medium path of accumulation, and you no longer can lose your bodhicitta. You could lose your bodhicitta on the small path before you have this bodhisattva vow, but once you reach this next stage, you'll never lose your bodhicitta. You'll be a bodhisattva until you're a Buddha. So those were the things that were necessary to then take that bodhisattva vow. And then last week we started causes. There's general causes and specific causes. And under general causes, there are three categories: cause, condition, and power. So we went through the general causes. When we went over general cause, category cause last time. So let's just read through those again. And we talked about compassion, what it would take to get compassion. How would that happen? And we found out that we would need to have a relationship with sentient beings that is different than the one that we currently have. We would need to be able to equally want to benefit all our friends, enemies, and neutrals. And then we would have to, through a series of meditations, depending on which ones we use, get to a point where we would want all of those beings to have happiness. And then we would get to a place where we would want all those beings to be free from suffering, based on understanding what suffering is. And Pabonka Rinpoche really, really does a beautiful job when he explains it. He says that, when you're meditating on love, that really, that desire to want beings to be happy comes from you wanting to repay their kindness. But when you want them to be free from suffering, it comes from thinking about suffering and really saturating your mind with suffering. And that's where that meditation about the sheep comes from, where you imagine the sheep that's about to be slaughtered and the fear and everything, and wishing that you could free them. That all these beings are under an immense amount of fears, and tortured and suffer so much. And we recognize that, how nice it would be if they could be free from that suffering. We need to taste it. We need to think about bad things in order for us to say, my God, sentient beings suffer so much. We need to bring our mind to that place. We have to bring our mind to a place that knows we're going to die. We don't know when, and the only thing that can help it is Dharma. We have suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, suffering of meeting with the unpleasant, separation from the pleasant, not getting what we want, and being thrust again and again and again into this situation. We have to think about that, and then think about everyone else and then what they're enduring in order to really realistically want to have them free from suffering. So, awakening the lineage of the great vehicle as a cause. So one example was great compassion, those things that are within the lineage of the great vehicle, awakening it up, waking it up, maybe previous lives, you meditated on it and you had some obscurations that weren't allowing you to remember it in this life. And now all of a sudden it wakes up because you start meditating on love and compassion and it starts to wake up a little bit. So you've awoken that Mahayana lineage. Being taken care of by a spiritual friend, which is a cause. I clarified it with Geshe-la, and he said that that's definitely, that you have a teacher who's taking care of you and telling you what to do and what not to do, and so forth. And that becomes the cause. The cause, which is under the influence of love and compassion. Your mind has to be saturated with the desire to have beings have happiness and be free from suffering in order for you to want to become a Buddha for their sake. Because that's why you're becoming a Buddha, is to free them from suffering and bring them to a place of eternal happiness, free them from fear and give them eternal happiness. It's that sixth cause of the 7-point cause and effect called the extraordinary attitude, which really throws you into this idea that you must become a Buddha, because you're like, I'm going to make everyone happy and I'm going to free everyone. And then you realize you can't and must become a Buddha, right? We'll get into that in the specific causes for generating bodhicitta next week, probably. Third, the cause which is under the influence of love and great compassion. Number 4, enduring hardship for others, which is a cause. So we have to be able to endure hardship. We found in the text last week that said that it's not going to be easy, and that we're going to have to endure a lot of hardship, and we have to be willing to in order to generate bodhicitta. Okay, so the condition, seeing the inconceivable power of the bodhisattva. So, right, like if you didn't know what a bodhisattva could do, why would you want to become one? The bodhisattva can become a Buddha. No one else can. The bodhisattva can do all these miraculous things on the various 5 paths. So you see these powers that the bodhisattva has, and it makes you want to be one. So it's one of the conditions present. You got to know what a bodhisattva is, what kind of powers a bodhisattva has. And we can get into that a little bit more, but let's just go through the list. Repeatedly hearing the scriptural basket of the bodhisattva. So when we look at the various teachings the Buddha gave teachings that weren't Mahayana, that were Theravadan teachings, less individual liberation teachings for someone to just become liberated for themselves. So those aren't the kind of teachings that serve as a condition. Teachings that tell you how to become liberated for yourself, how to be happy just for yourself. Those aren't the kind of teachings that you will make you get bodhicitta. It's the teachings of the Mahayana, hearing repeatedly the scriptural basket of the bodhisattva. So you got to hear you have to hear the Mahayana teachings to become a bodhisattva. It's pretty obvious, but some things aren't. Not being able to bear the decline of the great vehicle teaching. It's in that 6 ideas that we're supposed to have before we even started listening to a teaching, that we can't bear the decline of it. But this is, we're becoming a bodhisattva because we can't. So, because if we're a bodhisattva, then there's Mahayana. If there's a bodhisattva in the world, there's a Mahayanist in the world. The Mahayana is in the world. Interesting, right? And then seeing the rarity of mind generation during these degenerate times. The fact that we're sitting here listening to a teaching on Dharma is not the norm. These are very degenerate times. Beings, for the most part, Arya Deva's 400 verses again, beings for the most part are involved in the ignoble. Therefore, most normal beings go to the lower realms. It's very, very rare that we're here sitting listening to this tonight. It isn't the norm. It isn't. And then how many, okay, so now you have all of Buddhism. Everyone in the world that could be hearing a Buddhist teaching right now, how many of them are hearing the Mahayana teaching? Because we have entire countries where of Theravadan tradition, or places, the majority of that place is Theravadan, that do not hear the scriptural basket of the Bodhisattva. Hundreds of thousands of people in their lifetime that are Buddhists or considered Buddhists don't hear the the basket of the Bodhisattva. And the fact that they're hearing anything about the Buddha Dharma is rare. Think about the world. Think about the ants. Think about the bugs. Think about all the beings. Think about who's hearing the Mahayana Dharma right now. We are. A few other people here and there. There's a lot of Zoom links open right now. It's high time, 8:30 p.m. on a Thursday. But there's, 5 people here, 10 people here. How many people are in the United States? How many people are in the world? We can count those. We can't count the number of sentient beings, really. How many of them do you think are hearing the Dharma tonight? You think beings in hell have a moment to think about anything but suffering? Or a hungry ghost or an animal? Animals just walking around looking for food and wanting to be pet, need somewhere to sleep, and hoping nothing bigger eats it. That's most of an animal's life. We have this human basis right now where we can study. And not only do we have this human basis, but we have the Mahayana doctrine. We have these teachings that tell us exactly how to become a bodhisattva without error. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6, step 7. And these are the pre-steps. Here's the Lamrim Chemo. You want to be a bodhisattva? Just do this, right? We have it in our hands right here. As Pabunka Rinpoche named, or Trijung, whoever, named that text, Namdru Lajang, liberation in our hands. And it was a Mahayana text, so it meant Buddhahood in our hands. Because we have it all. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. Right there. No excuses. No excuses not to become better people by next week and better people by the week after that. Our unruly mind can be tamed. There's no excuse. I mean, there's reasons and, karma, and we have a lot of excuses, of course, right? And this is not simple. I don't want to convey that, it's just so simple and just get over yourselves. It's not like that at all. It's very difficult, but you have to get over yourselves. I mean, that's what Buddhism is. We've got to get over ourselves because this self we think is here doesn't exist. It's merely a name on a collection. It'll be a new name next time when we get a new collection. Maybe I'll be Bob the Squirrel because I'll have squirrel parts. And I won't remember any of this. I'll just think I'm a squirrel and I'll be afraid something bigger is going to eat me. I'll be searching for food and shelter. And that whole life, that's all I'll do. We got to take advantage of what we have right now. We really, really, really can't put this off. Too many young people are dying randomly. Too many people are passing away well before their time. In my life, I know. People I went to high school with. I'm only 50, almost 50. Handfuls of dead people that I went to high school with. Handfuls. And from all kinds of causes. Cancer, drugs, car accidents. The only difference between us and them is we're not dead yet. The only reason we're not a squirrel running around is we're still breathing. So let's seize this opportunity. We have this Mahayana Dharma to practice. And then there's powers. I'm not going to get into too much detail about this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Then there's powers through one's own power. Then through the power of others, the power of meditation, and the power of application. This I will go over because it's not as self-explanatory. So power, one's own power. So Rinpoche told me that this is really someone of sharp faculties, someone who can, without seeing suffering of others, generate it. By understanding suffering, they're so sharp they understand everyone else has it. So really, this is the most stable power. Relying on others' suffering is a less stable power when you read about it in the Lam Rim. Isn't that weird, right? Because you don't really understand your own suffering completely. You're just seeing something that doesn't look pleasant. And that may not motivate you enough. I mean, how many things have we seen with our eyes that we're suffering without really understanding suffering? It really doesn't necessarily motivate us to become a Buddha, certainly. So it's this understanding through one's own power, one's own understanding that's strong. But then secondly, it says through the power of others, arisen from depending on the suffering of others, seeing the suffering of others, hearing about the suffering of others, etc. But through one's own power is where it starts. One really, really understands suffering and then can apply it to others. Newly arisen through the power, power of meditation. Newly arisen through the power of habituation of mind generation from past lives. So here's a power. So we're here tonight because we have karmic connections to this material. There's no question about it. Some of us have practiced it more than others. Some of us might be right on the edge, about to become a bodhisattva. Others of us are maybe not anywhere near that, but can with this information if we apply it. But by applying it now in the future life, or in the future, or just call it, because this is about lives, in the future life, we will be able to connect with these teachings and understand them. So this is a power that's necessary to get bodhicitta. Previous habituation. Not previously getting it, previously wanting to get it, previously meditating on what it would take to get it in a previous life. So we're doing right now, what we're doing right now becomes the power that produces bodhicitta. Really amazing. And then power of application, arisen from the kindness of a great spiritual friend. Watching a spiritual teacher and saying, man, I would love to be like them. This isn't very stable either, it says in the text. And that's why we have to be careful with thinking of our teacher like a god that can just solve all our problems, right? That's not the case. Our teacher can teach us, but if we just look at what they do and say, oh, wow, they're really great. They're really great bodhisattva. I'd like to be like that. That's kind of weak. Really, it's just like, oh, wow, he was able to become president. I don't think I could do that. And then you end up there. Well, Kensur Geshe Wandak, because he was, like that, he could realize it. No, he realized it because he was like us. Practiced this, studied this, and then realized it. I don't know if it was in that particular life. Right? I mean, Rinpoche was recognized as just a genius from Jump Street, right from the beginning, just going through this material like it was such second nature that no one even wanted to debate him. I spoke with so many geshes from his years of being studying, old geshes, and they said that, there was really no one. When he got his Geshe Larampa degree that year, normally they give numbers like Larampa number 1, Larampa number 2, and everyone just from that generation, they didn't give him out that year. It was just like, well, it was Geshe Wandak. I mean, there was no one else who was even close. He would walk into the debate courtyard and people would pretend they were doing something else or find some debate partner real quick to start debating because he could tell you wrong stuff and prove it. He was so sharp. That's what they used to tell me. They'd say, Geshe Wandak, he could tell us anything and we'd believe it because he was such a logician. So we've got to be careful, right? We've got to become that kind of a sharp person, that kind of a logician. So people can't just tell us anything. So we can't hear things like, we're already a Buddha. Wait for it and believe that's the case. Or just empty your mind. It's fine. That's all you have to do. These other teachings are really way too conceptual. All this conceptuality is actually binding you to cyclic existence. You just need to bliss out and meditate and empty your mind out. Right? We need to be able to be logical and say, no, that's not correct. And this is why. We're not getting at the root of an affliction by emptying the mind. We're not hitting the target. So if you take anything from any of these classes, I really, really hope that you take the fact that study is something that you cannot put down. There's always something more to learn. And as you learn more, I promise you that your mind will mature. I promise you that the more information you put in it, the clearer the pathways will become. the more believable they will become. And I promise you, if you every day apply this material, you will have realizations. I mean, there's this talk like, are these teachings producing realizations in beings? You know, still is this a lineage that can produce realizations in beings? And I'm here to say, yes, absolutely, 100%. This lineage produces realizations in beings. I have had a maturity happen within my mind. Not a full maturity, not everyone knows who I am. I'm not pretending to be something I'm not, but I'm saying that these teachings have touched my mind in such a way that my mind does not operate. I've been studying Buddhism almost 30 years, right? Since 1995. My mind does not operate in a way that's even remotely similar to that mind almost 30 years ago. And it's not because, oh, it's calmer. It isn't even calmer. But it really, really understands and discerns things in such a different way that it's inarguably changing the way that I apprehend reality. And I can say with certainty that I was able to realize the first Lam Rim topic of Guru devotion. I can't say that I have any other grand realizations, but I was able to realize that first topic and believe it wholeheartedly in an incontrovertible fashion, that I know that teacher is the source of all goodness. And I just encourage you all to keep going, keep trying, keep practicing, believe it works, and know that it's not going to work overnight, and that working is measured in very, very small baby steps. But if you've been around Buddhism for a lot of years and you're not finding your minds changing or different, you need to do something different. You need to study more. You need to meditate more. You need to do something because your mind should be changing. Hopefully last week, you were a little more ignorant than you were this week. If you're the same ignorant, there's something wrong because we have the tools to become less ignorant. And we don't know when we're going to die. So it's absurd that we wouldn't have become a little bit less ignorant over the course of this week. So that's what we have to do. I mean, it isn't that we can just not ever do this. We eventually have to do all of this work. And how will we know we have the right work in front of us to do? We have the right work in front of us right now. So I just beg all of you to please, please take advantage of this human life. Take advantage of the thing that Khenso Geshe Wandak took advantage of, that the Dalai Lama takes advantage of, that Shakugen Nima took advantage of, and Khenso Pema Jetsun took advantage of, and Ling Rinpoche took advantage of, and Trijung Rinpoche took advantage of. I mean, these are our Gen Uzir, Gen Lachat, Apu. These are all our lineage, all our teachers' teacher, Rinpoche's teachers. They were able to teach such a skilled, logical being because they themselves studied. So let's end there. Yeah, because we'll get into the specific causes next week of bodhicitta, and I think that it's a good place to end. We'll get into the 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta, and we're going to spend a lot of time on it. We're not going to just rip through it. We're going to spend the Lamrim Chemo kind of and Namdur Lajang time on the section of the 7-point cause and effect. And we're going to use a lot of other commentaries as well. And we're also going to do the same for equalizing and exchanging self with others. We're going to go into all the Lojong texts we can find when we get into mind training. And we are not going to leave any stones unturned, the stones I can find anyway. So yeah, I mean, the books are right here, they're all right there. All the information's in there and you never have to suffer again and you could be eternally happy. All the information's right there. There's nothing there. If you took all these books here, you wouldn't even need all of them. But if you took all these books here and you knew it was in them and applied it, you'd become a Buddha. And it's not like we have like a library, like, with 1 million books in here, there's a couple hundred books or something. But yeah, I just encourage you to never be satisfied with impartial instructions, as Lama Tsongkhapa was, and always be trying to learn more. And like the Kadampa master said, you stop learning when you're a Buddha. So does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, it's me. It's cold, Jeff.
Yeah, you were late.
I know. I saw your text though.
Yeah, I sent you a text when I started class.
I know. Sorry.
There's no sorries. I'm just, what's up?
Okay, so,
what's your question?
So I know we were talking about Bodhicitta, is the path of seeing, the path of meditation, the path of no more learning. Are those the only stages where it's engaged Bodhicitta? So is it like for that to get engaged, or just Bodhicitta in general? Do you have to do you have to see the path of seeing in order for that to take effect?
Okay, so the answer is no. You could have, if you were a sharp bodhisattva. You may have seen emptiness already and then gotten to that level.
Okay.
But no, absolutely not. The path of accumulation is where you take the bodhisattva vow.
Okay.
And then the path of accumulation, then the path of preparation, and then the path of seeing. So a bodhisattva who has the bodhisattva vow has not necessarily seen emptiness yet. A sharp bodhisattva has seen emptiness already. But normal, like the norm, the bodhisattva norm, if you will, is that no, they have not seen emptiness yet. They generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and they're on the path of accumulation. Then they take the bodhisattva vow, then they're still on the path of accumulation. And then they go through the different paths. And the path of preparation, the bodhisattva is actually honing in on emptiness, right? They're using their concentration and their wisdom, and they're trying to unite it into one place, one single focus. And then they eventually get to the place, and on the path of preparation, there's 4 levels: heat, peak, patience, and the last mundane state. And they get to this place, it's called the last mundane state, because it's the last time that bodhisattva will be called an ordinary being. Because the next thing is they see emptiness and on the path of seeing. So that's the way it happens. They have an inferential valid cognition of emptiness, a normal bodhisattva. At the path of preparation, they go through 4 stages. They get to the peak of
cyclic existence.
Not peak of cyclic existence, the peak of ordinary being.
Yeah.
The highest ordinary being there could be, the most knowledgeable, highest ordinary being there could be. And then they see emptiness because they're a bodhisattva, right? So they're the most highest ordinary being they could be. And then they see emptiness, and then they become a superior bodhisattva. And then they're on the first ground. And we can go through, there's a lot of different ways to go through bodhicitta also. You can look at it in terms of those pathways, but you can also look at it in terms of the 22 types of bodhicitta that you find in the Abhisamma Alankara. Ground, gold, well, I'll list them. Ground, gold, waxing moon. Okay, so those are the first 3 names of the 22 types of bodhicitta. And those are all on the path of accumulation.
Okay. And just another quick question. I just wanted to see if you could give me some input on Vajrapani and his role. Because, it's the last mantra we recite in the Buddhist prayer book. So is he like the guardian of all the Buddhas, basically? Like the warrior protector deities in a way?
Vajrapani is considered the Buddha of power.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer the question because I don't feel that I have like a solid enough, like Vajrapani was the Buddha, but Vajrapani was also a bodhisattva in Sutrayana, and Tantrayana, Vajrapani is a Buddha. But I will leave that question up to more qualified people to answer.
All right. Yeah, I can always research it.
Yeah, there's a lot of great information out there. And I can try to find you some authoritative sources for it myself and let you know about it.
Sounds good.
But yeah, I don't want to give a half a story about something like Vajrapani.
Yeah, Rinpoche would be the same way. He would say that it's like would take like a commentary. Because I asked him once about like you explain Om Mani Padme Hum, and he was like, "You said it. One of you guys said that would take a long time to go over." I don't know if you remember that or not. But it doesn't matter.
There's a lot of different, absolutely. Because when you look at the syllables of Om Mani Padme Hum, six realms.
Oh, no.
Freeing.
Oh.
There's that description also. Freeing beings as you're doing it from the 6 realms. So there's a lot. And also the mantra means the jewel in the lotus of Chenrezig. But the mantras and the commentaries and what the Buddhas represent and how they manifest and what they are according to, because the Buddhas, a lot of them go across all the tantras, right? There's the action tantra form and performance tantra form and so forth. So let's leave tantric stuff to more qualified individuals, but I can lead you in a direction where you can find out that information.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Tosh.
Oh, hello. So my question is about Tonglen, and I find that if I have a small object of observation, like one person or one animal or one kind of being, it seems easier to give and take. But once I try to think about all sentient beings, it's much harder to visualize them receiving. So I'm just kind of wondering, when we touch upon, I was wondering when you start to discuss Tonglen in the future, could you specify like the easiest way to visualize all sentient beings receiving the white light? Like, what's the object of observation for the white light when we visualize freeing all sentient beings from suffering and giving them compassion and the causes of compassion? What's that visualization? Because I can say it and I can think about it, but I don't have it visually to complement the meditation.
Very hard to visualize all sentient beings. We can't even come up with how many there are. Our minds aren't big enough. So how are we going to visualize something we can't count? Great question. So the texts say that we're not, first of all, we aren't starting in like you said, we're not starting in that place where we're trying to start with everyone, because that wouldn't be realistic. It's very easy to make it impersonal when you do it like that. So what it says to do is to, start with beings that and then maybe add on some neutral beings, and then you add on beings that you don't like. And you should, if you're thinking of dogs and cats and things, a lot of beings, people at work, you know what I mean? You can make your visualization bigger and bigger and bigger. And a bodhisattva becomes more capable of counting sentient beings. So a bodhisattva becomes more capable of visualizing more sentient beings. So we'll get to it. We'll get into the actual meditations of the, giving the light of our root virtues to those beings as the object. So basically the basic gist of it is, anybody who's, not heard of Tonglen before, Tonglen is giving and taking practice. It's a practice found in the Lojong, the mind training texts, passed down from, Nagarjuna, Manjushri, Shantideva, profound view lineage stuff. And it's a practice that after you go through these meditations on recognizing the downfalls of the self-cherishing attitude and the actual excellent benefits of cherishing others, that you want to figure out how you could serve all beings in the way that they would want to be served. Like, we have this self-cherishing attitude. Imagine if the way that we cherished ourselves, we cherished others, meaning like, okay, how would we give them what they need based on what they would want, right? You know, like all sentient beings want happiness and the causes of happiness. So you're changing that attitude that says, may I have happiness, to may they have happiness. So you're switching it. So you're taking this attitude that's normally like so tight and bound to yourself, and you're saying, what if that tight bound attitude was just as strong, but it was focused on wanting others to be free? So it's taking that tight bound self-cherishing attitude and just turning it into another cherishing attitude that's so tightly bound in a way. Because you want it to have the force of your self-cherishing. Because imagine if we could cherish others with that force. That force is so strong, right? All you have to do is be in pain a little bit, and you yell out and cry. That force of self-preservation, of wanting to not have suffering, is so strong. So if you had that strong wish that you had to be free from suffering, if it was just as strong as that, but you wanted to bring other people to happiness and free them from suffering, that would be an exchange of an attitude. So that's why it's called exchanging self with others. It's not like, oh, I just walk down the street and I imagine I'm you. No, you do for a second, like imagine what that sentient being might need, but then you're you behaving towards them in the way that you can give them complete happiness. So it's the shift of mind that you're trying to make occur. So Tonglen aids us in that shift by imagining, like I said, you start with someone you care about in front of you, and you want to work with them in removing. I'll tell you the meditation. Then you make maybe neutral people, and then enemies, and then you build it. There's more and more neutral people that you can build upon. They become all sentient beings, right? Once you run out of sentient beings that you can kind of picture in a bunching, then you have to start going into neutral area territory, and that takes meditating on beginningless lives, and takes meditating on a lot of things. But the basic meditation is this: you have one being, 10 beings, a million beings, ever many beings, and whatever types of beings there are in front of you. You eventually end up at all sentient beings. You imagine that you're taking on their suffering. Imagine that their suffering is coming onto you in the form of a black light into your right nostril. And you imagine that it's going down and it lands on your self-cherishing attitude and burns it to bits. You imagine it's like smoking, like it's been burned away. So you imagine that you take on the suffering of all these beings in the form of a black light, and you imagine it just, sometimes they say like it's shaving off of the beings, this black light, almost like there's fur coming off of them, or they're shaving it off. It's just like these black lights are coming out of them, and you're imagining them that they're purified of all of their suffering. You imagine that now they're purified of their suffering. You imagine that this light comes in and destroys your self-cherishing attitude. And then you, with a determination to give them all of your happiness, you imagine that in the form of a white light from your left nostril, that all of your root virtues and all forms of happiness go to those beings who are in the space in front of you. And you imagine that this practice then transforms them into enlightened beings. One practice says that you should always remember at the end that this practice is actually working. And you're imagining these beings becoming Buddhas. Because when we look at bringing them to happiness, sure, there's this, the forms of happiness in the higher realms, but then there's the happiness of liberation, and then the happiness of Buddhahood. So we're really trying to make them become Buddhas. So we're imagining that this is really, really working. So that's the meditation. So just imagine as you're doing that, you're thinking of, oh, I'm taking this suffering on of theirs, taking their birth, their aging, their sickness. I'm taking away their cancer. I'm taking away all of their memories of child abuse. I'm taking away all of their worries at work. I'm taking away all of their fears. You're imagining you're just taking this all on, and it's just destroying your self-centered attitude. And then you imagine that you're giving them all of your root virtues. You're giving them all the happiness that you could ever know. And this really has an effect on your mind when you do this over and over and over and over and over again. and you think about what root virtues are as you're giving them to them. You're giving them the abandonment of killing, the abandonment of stealing, the abandonment of adultery, the abandonment of lying. You're giving them the abandonment of criticizing others. The first Bodhisattva vow, don't criticize others. You're giving them the abandonment of that. You're giving them the abandonment of the highest yoga tantric abandonments. So you're meditating on the path also, in a way. It's not just this giving and taking. It's saturated with all of the understandings of what suffering is, and what virtue is, what root virtue is, what happiness is. I mean, happiness is like a bowl of ice cream, but that's not the happiness we're giving to sentient beings. I mean, we can imagine they get some ice cream and then they transform into a Buddha, but really we're trying to give them permanent happiness, eternal happiness. So we'll get into, there's a lot of different forms of that meditation and a lot of advices. And there's a lot of very interesting advice. I didn't even get into the emptiness part, because in the Lamrim Chemo, it talks about how the emptiness helps the equalizing, exchanging self with others, and recognizing, you know, how we're a collection of parts, they're a collection of parts, and that the karma is what's creating all of these dependent arisings. So yeah, so that's the gist of it. But we'll get much, much more into the practice and how we would build upon, you know, that visualization. And our visualizations get bigger as our mind gets bigger, right? Our practice gets bigger as our motivation gets bigger.
I'm sorry. So in like trying to follow Geshe Chikawa's text, and you try to place giving and taking upon the breath.
Mm-hmm.
I think I feel sometimes like I'm so caught up in the words and the visualization, it's making my breath uneven, and I'm trying to get it all in, and sometimes it's overwhelming, because I think my object of observation being all sentient beings, and I'm trying to really wrap my head around what that is, you know, the hungry ghosts, the scent eaters, all these things that I know about, but sometimes it just gets overwhelming. So I didn't know if there was something somewhere that was like an image per se.
I see. Yeah, it can be very, very overwhelming. And in the Lojong texts, it says, don't even start the meditation without the breath. So maybe that's helpful. Do the meditation just as a visualization and then put it on the breath later. The Lojong says to start without the breath. It says start with the visualization and then add the breath. Because the breath, yeah, sure, it causes more excitement if you are just adding steps, right? And you're trying to think and you're trying to do the best you can. And I think that's the key advice, is the best you can. Because when it comes to even single pointed concentration, Lama Tsongkhapa says, get the image to the best place you can and move on, and use this dull image, this unclear image, as your single pointed concentration image. Don't try to get it perfect. You're wasting your time. Make the image, even it says if it's like when you're trying to do Tara or practice or something, if it's and you're doing a front generation, if you just have like a white light and you can't get past that, start there, but don't think of anything else but the white light, and then build on it. You know, our minds will become more able to navigate through all of these difficult, you know, things once we're sharper, and once we're clearer, and once we have the tool set to do it. And the tool set comes from meditation, comes from concentration, without getting single mental quiescence. And it's really, really difficult to even talk about trying to do these vast visualizations without single pointed concentration, and with the ability to focus a mind in such a way, and not just single pointedly, the ability to focus in a mind. So don't be hard on yourself. Do the best you can. Imagine that there's a blob of beings if you have to, right? You know what you're trying to think about. You know you're trying to make your mind bigger and thinking about more beings you can help. So don't be so hard on yourself and so strict and rigid, but don't be satisfied with that. Try and make it a little better the next time you do it. Add a little bit more detail. But without the concentration, it's going to be hard to add those details. So it's really important for us as practitioners to do meditation, to focus on the breath, to just try to get our minds more pliable, because it's hard to do these you have to, when you get into the higher teachings, there's so much going on at once in your meditation that without knowing how to really move your mind to one place or the other, it's just like you'll do this and then you'll go over here and do that, and then you'll do this over here, and you'll do this one over here, and it's supposed to be integrated into one visualization. I mean, when you get into the higher tantras, it's ridiculous the amount of stuff going on that you're supposed to be visualizing simultaneously. And then like in the size of a mustard seed, when they tell you the punchline, when you hear the punchline to that, that's how, focused you should be able to do it. So just be easy on yourself, but don't stop, like a river, like a nice stream that keeps going, keep going, making sure you're focused, making sure you keep practicing, keep studying, learn something new a little bit every day. And the next thing you'll know is you'll acquire new skill sets. But calming the mind's the hardest thing. I just heard a teaching from Geshe Damdu in Tibet House in India, and he was saying, like, the Buddha told us how to change our outward behavior because that was the easier thing to do first. Our 3 things of the body, 4 things of the speech. The Buddha didn't in the Vinaya tell people what to do with their mind because he knew that was impossible. That mind was just going to do what it was going to do, and that you could be smiling and angry. The mind wasn't something that the Buddha could put rules on because our mind is so unruly. The Buddha knew you first had to modify this stuff and make your mind be like, okay, don't kill, don't steal, and get mindful with that before you could start working on the mind. Those last 3 non-virtues get worked on with samadhi, with samten, with concentration. That's how the mind stuff gets worked out. So it takes a lot of effort, but here we are, we have time. We would do a lot of effort to do other stuff that was nowhere near as important. We put so much effort into things in life, to learn nonsense, to do nonsense, to visit nonsense, preparations and all this stuff we do, and for nonsense. So why not do something for something important? So we'll end there. Any more questions? Sorry, I know I'm 9 minutes over. But it is what it is. No more questions. We will then do the concluding prayers, and I really appreciate everybody listening so well. And I'm continuing my education. I just want everyone to know I've just enrolled into a program out of Delhi. It's a 2-month program that allows me to get into a master program through Tibet House Delhi. It's all in English. It's not in Tibetan. I'm not sure if I'm going to take the master's program or not. I'm just looking at the certificate program right now to see if it's something I want to put 5 years into. But they go through Abhisam Alamkara, 70 topics, Pramanavartika. And I don't want to stop learning. So it's not like I'm just sitting here stagnant. I know everything and I'm trying to teach you. I know I have to continue learning. I speak with Geshe Aga like 2 or 3 times a week. This week, not as much, but before, like 2 or 3 times a week, to talk about these texts. And I talk with Kenzin Ladrin, Geshe Mo Ladrin, sometimes like once a week, and talk about this stuff. Because we never stop learning. 25 years with Geshe Wandak, and I still feel like I know this much. And that's how we should all feel, unless we're Buddhas. So anyway, we close it up. Closing shot. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. I pray that Khenso Geshe Wandak will meet with us in whatever form he chooses to emanate from the Dharmakaya, to be able to mature us to the point where we can become Buddhas. May we never be separated from Khenso Geshe Wandak in all of our lives, and may he remain our teacher until we cross from the 10th Bodhisattva ground into Buddhahood. Real quickly, just to put in your minds, anybody who's local, Sakardawa is Tuesday the 14th. We have been invited by the Norwich Tibetans. Rinpoche started a connection with these Tibetans in Norwich. They're mostly Nyingma practitioners, but there's a ton of them. And they started coming to Rinpoche's teachings. They came to the Waitar initiation, and then we did the Drapa Sundri initiation, the Vajrapani Harigriva Garuda initiation that some came to. So it was so nice. They called me the other morning and invited us to 4 different events. The first is starting for Tuesday night, Sakardawa, the 14th. It'll be started 6 p.m. It's at the Knights of Columbus in, I believe, Norwich. I'm going to be going as long as, Lori's feeling okay and so forth. We plan on going. It's right at the end of her treatments, so we don't know how she's going to feel, but our intention is to go. We weren't able to go last year. They invited us all last year, but Rinpoche wasn't well enough to be in a crowd or to get into the Knights of Columbus Hall. So it's wonderful now that we can go there and share Sakardawa with the Tibetans, and it was so nice of them to invite us. I didn't know who it was, and it was someone with a different dialect. So it was very funny when I got the call. I was saying, "You're coming to my house in Connecticut?" And then we sorted it all out, and it was that group inviting all of us to their celebration. It's from 6 to 9. It'll be a really wonderful event. And we went to a summer picnic with all of them also. Rinpoche and Lobsang Dunya also went. John, I forgot his real name already. It must be working, Lobsang Dunya. So yeah, it's going to be really neat, and they'll read all the prayers, and we'll get to see some Tibetan culture. And most of all, they invited us. One of the Bodhisattva vows is you shouldn't, if you've been invited to something, if you can and you have no other reason not to go, you have to accept the invitation, and you shouldn't do it out of not because of pride, or you read the Bodhisattva vows. You should accept invitations if you can, and be a Bodhisattva, a fake Bodhisattva there, and try and show sentient beings love. We'll have more details about that Sunday. I'll put the address out and everything. Maybe we'll put it in the chat for people. But yeah, so that's where I'll be on Tuesday. And then Sunday, I will see you all at 10 a.m. for a Lam Rim class. And yeah, we're going to start to get into how to give a teaching, and then the Guru devotion. So yeah, thank you, everyone. I really, really appreciate you. May your weeks, so now it's Thursday, right? So ask yourself, what are you going to do to improve the quality of yourself as a human being between now and then? That's the question. Because we shouldn't even be doing this if it's not producing results. We shouldn't even be taught, you know what I mean? If it's not working, you should really, really look at why it's not working. And you gauge it by, what am I going to do to improve the quality of myself as a human being today? And then wake up tomorrow and ask yourself the same thing. When you wake up, realize life's impermanent. That's what the Buddha said. Wake up, first thing you should think about is impermanence. That should set the tone for your day. So I hope everyone wakes up tomorrow thinking about impermanence. I hope everyone wakes up tomorrow. And then I hope everyone wakes up tomorrow and thinks about impermanence and thinks about how they could become a better human being that day. And then by Sunday, when we have another Lam Rim class, you'll hopefully be showing up a better person. And then, you'll be leaving the Lam Rim class a little bit better with a little more wisdom. And then by the following Thursday, you should be even a better person than you were Sunday. That's the goal. Hard, baby steps. Don't try to measure it this big, measure it this big. But if you just rooted a little something out, be proud of yourself because it's hard to do. All right, see you all later.